Well, to understand the historic, apocalyptic, worst ever firestorm in Los Angeles, you can begin with the thought of what a hurricane would be without the wind. It would be a rainstorm. It could be a heavy rainstorm, but never more than a rainstorm. The water might find some leaks in your roof. There might be some huge puddles out there on the road that you can't drive through if it's a really, really bad rainstorm. But there would be very, very little actual destruction in a hurricane without wind, a rainstorm. Wind is the single most destructive force that exists in our natural elements. The destructive force of a hurricane is in the wind, not the rain. The wind speed is what you fear in a hurricane. The wind speed is what they keep reporting to you. The wind speed is what can kill you. That's why they want you to know it. The wind is what you're fleeing when you're evacuating a hurricane. The wind can sink the biggest ships ever built. The ocean doesn't sink those ships. The wind does. The wind creates those giant waves that can sink those ships. The wind can down airplanes. The wind can rip the roof off a building. A funnel of wind called a tornado can knock down everything in its path. They called it the Pacific Ocean when they first saw it, standing on cliffs in what's now California, looking out on that ocean, because after their experience with the stormy, windy Atlantic, they were looking at the calmest ocean scene they had ever seen, the most peaceful ocean they had ever seen. When they first stood on the west coast of this continent and looked out at that ocean on the edge of what is now called California, they thought, how peaceful, how Pacific. That's what Pacific means. They really couldn't believe that it wasn't just windy all the time, like an ocean is supposed to be. But wind is the most dangerous natural element in California. Wind can destroy much more than earthquakes can destroy. Because when a strong wind finds even the slightest spark, it turns it into fire and then turns fire into an explosion of flame and blows it at everything in whatever direction the wind is blowing. The prevailing wind in Los Angeles, the most common direction of the wind, is from the ocean to the land. The wind carries the coolness of the ocean air and the moisture of the ocean air. The most dangerous wind, the wind that is burning down Los Angeles tonight, comes from the east. It comes from the desert areas east of Los Angeles. And that wind, that deadly flamethrower wind, is named after a saint, Santa Ana. Almost all the place names in California are Spanish, since it is all territory that was once Mexico, seized by the United States. Even the wind has a Spanish name, Santa Ana. It is as hot a wind that blows in America. It travels over land with none of the cooling power of the ocean, none of the moisture of the ocean. It is dry. And when it's traveling over the driest of California land that hasn't seen rain during the rainy season, ignition is inevitable. It has to happen. It has to happen. And that is why, before a single spark emerged anywhere in Los Angeles, the fire department issued a warning the night before the fire started, saying that Tuesday would be an extremely high-risk fire day in Los Angeles, not because anyone was going to make a careless mistake with a cigarette, but because of the fact that the warm Santa Ana wind coming across the driest of winter Los Angeles in many years would surely somewhere be turned into fire. The question was just how big. And when the Santa Ana came, it was the worst wind Los Angeles had ever seen. Gusts up to 100 miles per hour. I've never seen winds at half that speed in Los Angeles. Gusting winds at hurricane levels, a hurricane with no rain, a hurricane with only the destructive power of wind until that wind found a spark. And then, instead of delivering rain, that wind, that hurricane force wind, helps the kind of wind that whips at you during a hurricane, whips rain at you during a hurricane. Instead of whipping snow at you as it does during a blizzard, that wind, the Santa Ana wind, delivered what it's famous for. It delivered what it's feared for. That wind didn't deliver fire, didn't deliver snowflakes. That wind. It did deliver fire. Didn't deliver rain or snowflakes. That wind delivered fire. The wind put that fire where it is tonight. And asking why the fire department doesn't have the resources to put out these fires is like asking why the New York Fire Department couldn't put out a fire on the 100th floor of the World Trade Center caused by burning jet fuel. The fire on 9/11 was in an unreachable place for firefighting technology, and everyone knew that. Everyone understood. That's why that was so horrible. And that's where the Los Angeles fires always start. They start in inaccessible wilderness areas where fire trucks cannot reach. It takes a while for people to know that there is even a fire happening in those places, and by that time, it's already raging toward homes. And the fire department starts on these fires as far behind a Santa Ana wind fire as the New York Fire Department was behind when they rushed toward the World Trade Center. There was nothing that they could do on 9/11. And that is a human truth that some people refuse to learn. Every once in a while, there's nothing that we can do. It is not within our human power. Every once in a while, something happens that is beyond our control. And yes, sometimes that's fire. Everyone knows when hurricanes stop. Hurricanes stop when the winds stop. No one has ever stopped a hurricane. That's what's happening in Los Angeles. It is a hurricane without the rain. It is a hurricane with fire. The hurricane can only stop when the wind stops. In the meantime, the firefighters are doing as heroic a job as firefighters have ever done in the face of a California fire. Everything that I have just told you about Los Angeles fires has been true for every day of our lives. And quite understandably, most people outside of Los Angeles, outside of California, don't really understand that. The brilliant writer Joan Didion moved to Los Angeles from New York at the peak of her writing career. She was from Sacramento, so she knew a bit of what she was getting into in Los Angeles, where she added screenwriting to her literary workload. And 57 years ago, in Slouching Towards Bethlehem, Joan Didion wrote, "Los Angeles weather is the weather of catastrophe, of apocalypse. And just as the reliably long, bitter winters of New England determine the way life is lived there, so the violence and the unpredictability of the Santa Ana affect the entire quality of life in Los Angeles, accentuate its impermanence, its unreliability. The wind shows us how close to the edge we are." Thousands of people in Los Angeles have discovered this week that they were over the edge, and they have gone over the edge into the oblivion of complete burnout. Not just their burned down home, but their completely burned down street in their completely burned down neighborhood. And I remain among the lucky ones living on the edge. In my case, while I'm here in New York City studio tonight, my house in Los Angeles is right on the edge of the fire. Fire trucks have been on my street for most of the last 24 hours, hoping to hold the line at or near my street if the winds decide to blow more strongly in my direction. It's not up to the fire. What happens to my house or any house in Los Angeles is not up to the fire. Tonight, our homes in Los Angeles, if they will survive, is entirely up to the wind. And Santa Ana is going to come back tomorrow. And as usual, she will bring no mercy.